Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 20th of January. January's nearly over with already, really. What's happened to the month? It was only New Year's about 20 days ago.
Seems like a lot longer than that, Phil.
It does a bit. It really does. I think CES has that effect on you, doesn't it? It's almost like a whole year that you're there. Anyway, joining me on this edition, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
I see you've managed to get your shirt off.
And News Editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Whoever wrote this episode should die.
And Audio Reviewer Ed Selley.
What a savings.
Welcome back to the podcast. We didn't mention the sad passing of David Bowie last week on the podcast. And then not long after we recorded the podcast, in fact on Thursday, after the podcast went out on a Wednesday, we sadly lost Alan Rickman, which was, both of them, a bit of a shock. I think they'd kept it quiet that both were suffering and fighting against cancer. And sadly, both of them have lost their battle. And at the same age of 69 as well. I mean, it seems to be, 2016 hasn't been a great start to the year for some people.
No, it's really depressing. I mean, I got off the plane with you from CES the day Bowie died and drove home listening to Bowie, just like coincidentally, because I had the new album ordered. Got home, opened the postbox, pulled out Black Star, showed it to Laura and said, "Oh, look, Black Star." And she went, "Haven't you heard the news?" I went, "What news?" And he went, "Bowie's dead." And I'm man enough to admit this. I actually started to cry a little bit because I've been a massive Bowie fan since I was a kid. And obviously not knowing that he wasn't even ill, it was a huge shock. I mean, because you kind of think Bowie's immortal, it's Bowie, for God's sake. And listening to the album after that put it in a whole new light. It is tinged with death, shall we say.
Well, you see, the fact he was 69, that kind of... I thought he was a lot older than that, just because he seems like he's been around forever.
Yeah, you realise that by the time we got to sort of 1980, he'd done probably the most consistently brilliant body of work of any musical artist in history in a space of 10 years. He was about 30
yeah.
or 35. I mean, really not that old at all. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, look at you, Steve. You're what, nearly 50, and what have you done in your life?
Nothing.
Still yet to get your debut album out the door, slacker.
Well, having said all that, though, if you look at how old Alan Rickman was when he was in Die Hard, he was 39, so he's a bit of a late bloomer, wasn't he, really, in terms of his film career?
Okay.
I thought he was older than that. I thought he was 40.
Well,
that's a year.
40, Let's not split hairs.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a big psychological difference.
I'll say one thing for both of them. I think they both exited in a very dignified manner.
Yes.
Definitely. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they're both class acts, both in terms of the way they lived their lives and in terms of the way that they departed this world. And Bowie, from what I've read about him, and I've read a lot of his biographies and read a lot about him, he was not just a genius, and I genuinely mean that. I mean, I think that word's used far too frequently in these days, but he was a proper genius. He was also a really, really nice person, and that's unusual, I suspect, in that business. Yeah,
I mean, the thing with Bowie as well is that there was just as much crap as there was absolute masterpiece. It was such a varied background.
Well, yeah, but that's because it was always about innovating, always about pushing boundaries, using
totally.
technology to style at the time. And ultimately, if you do that, 28 times? Sooner or later, there's going to be some greatness and there's going to be some not at all greatness. The law of averages in that regard.
Even his Duff albums have good stuff on them. I mean, look, no one's going to say that Tonight's a good album because it isn't. And it's got the world's worst cover of God Only Knows. But in amongst that, there's things like Loving the Alien, which is a great song. And also, if you notice, and this is really nice of him, he would quite frequently cover songs he'd co-written with Iggy Pop in order to give Iggy some money through the publishing royalties. He put Bolan's son through school after Mark Bolan died. He was a genuinely decent bloke, and I think I haven't heard anyone who's had a bad word to say about David Bowie. So genius.
You don't spend enough time on Twitter. I completely agree with you.
I saw one guy mowing about him saying, he was a fascist and everything. In 1975, he made some ill-advised statements, but he was playing a character. He was playing the Thin White Duke who was meant to be a fascist dictator. So I think he just got a bit carried away. Plus, let's be honest, he was addled with cocaine at the time. I mean, he's not a racist. He married a black woman. He's been nothing but a decent person and a libertarian his entire life. And I wouldn't have a bad word said against him.
And Alan Rickman, his best performance would be?
I don't know. There's a couple to choose from.
We debated this, didn't we, on Friday, Ed?
There's two Alan Rickmans because you have to sort of separate some of the sort of real scene stealing stuff, the Die Hards, the Prince of Thieves, the Galaxy Quest, this world, with actually him turning in some really quite understated stuff. I mean, I have to admit, Truly Madly Deeply is not my favourite film of all time. My mother loves it, which may or may not say something, but that's he's really, really good in that, and differently good to, you know, running around yelling that he's going to take your insides out with a spoon. I mean, it's a demonstration that there's more than just the cartoon villainy to it.
True.
I mean, I rewatched Galaxy Quest over the weekend, and just the combination of how brilliantly he plays someone so utterly fed up with at the same time still chewing the scenery is just fantastic. In many ways, we said in the preamble bit of the podcast last week, I have a tremendous amount of time for David Bowie, not so much because of his catalogue, some of which I like, a lot of which I can quite contentedly not listen to ever again, but the amount of artists that I do love that trace inspiration to him. Rickman is just gutting, because fundamentally the sort of roles that Alan Rickman was exceptional at, him being superannuated would not have been too much of an issue to him continuing to do them. You couldn't easily say that his best years were behind him, not least because, as he pointed out earlier on, he didn't crack on until middle age. So yeah, I'm really, really down about Alan Rickman, more so in many ways than Bowie.
I don't like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, but I love the fact that he stole that entire film from under Kevin Costner's nose. That in itself is funny. And that's despite the fact that Costner had large chunks of Rickman cut out of the film because he was stealing it so much. He still stole the film. But for my money, Die Hard. First feature film, first of all, that's his first feature film. He's absolutely brilliant. And you're only as good as your villain when you're playing a hero. And he's one of the all-time great, Hans Gruber, one of the all-time great movie villains in, quite simply, the best action film ever made. Yeah, he's never going to, he was never going to top his first film, but he's done it. He's never been anything but brilliant in everything he's done. And he can do it all. He could do serious, he could do comedy. I think he's quite touching in Love Actually as well.
I was just going to mention that.
I mean, I confess that I'm not particularly fond of Harry Potter, either in books or cinematic forms, but it would appear from the outpouring of people who were quite a bit younger than me, and so on and so forth. I mean, he obviously got himself a whole new group of fans through being Snape, and you know, whilst it's not for me to judge whether he was a good one or not, I didn't really bother with the books. He seems to have got the job done. So yeah, you know, he was still knocking them out of the park.
Poor Emma Watson, where he got absolutely slaughtered on Twitter for her.
I don't think she really deserved that, to be honest.
No,
What did she do?
She basically put a quote up that Rickman had made about feminism, and basically everybody just said, "Oh, you're just using your friend's death to further your own purpose and your own career and your own ideas of things," and she got absolutely slaughtered on Twitter.
Well, it's all about virtue signalling, isn't it? Not a fan myself, but it's the done thing. You've got to show that you're right on and you care about stuff without actually doing anything about it. Just stick some shit up on your timeline and you're laughing.
But you basically just described the modern world, to be honest.
Okay, so let's move on swiftly. Right, so we have some current competitions and we also have some competition winners. So Mark, tell us all about it.
Okay, so the current competition is a copy of Tora on Blu-ray, and that one's open.
Which translated means
Bull.
Attack.
No, that's Toro, isn't it? A Toro, yes. I don't know. Yeah, attack. Thanks, Ed. What language is that? Spanish?
Japanese.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Pearl Harbor, so that's a clue.
I've got to say, I've never heard of it.
The Spanish were behind Pearl Harbor, weren't
Yeah, the Spanish bullfighting.
We're watching Animal House where Pluto goes when the Germans bomb Pearl Harbor, isn't it?
As you can see, I'm completely unaware of this movie. Anyway, moving on.
It's a very good film. And it has
It's a
quite
lot better than Pearl
exacting
Harbor.
attention to detail as well.
I'll enter the competition. Previous competition winners is Lesoir, who won good prize. He won the Yamaha RX A3040, courtesy of Scan. And Norlis, who I'm sure has won something before, probably a Blu-ray. He won a copy of Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, not Rouge Nation, on Blu-ray. I said it right. Quite proud.
You did say it right, and I'll come back to that pronunciation later on in this podcast, I think, Mark. I've got a bone to pick with you.
Which one?
Oof.
I'll come back to you later.
All right. Scared now.
You better hope it doesn't get cut out. Anyway, right, moving on.
Good point.
hardware news. I'm going to let Steve do some talking this week because I kind of took over it last time. So Hisense have announced sponsorship of
the Euro 2016 Championships, plus other European competitions as well. So quite a big deal for them, I think. I mean, obviously they've been sponsoring Red Bull for a couple of years now, and that's given them some exposure globally. But certainly in Europe, this is going to be really, really big exposure for Hisense. I mean, if they aren't that familiar a brand at the moment, I should imagine that after the summer, they will be a much, much more familiar brand in this country particularly, because, I mean, there's going to be big viewing numbers for the Euro Championships over the summer holiday, over summer months. When is it, June? Is it June or July?
Up until the quarterfinals in this country. And then...
oh, yeah, quite.
What, you think you're even going to get to the quarters? You'd be lucky to get out the group.
Oh, we've got 2 referees.
Actually, aren't Wales in our group?
Yeah, they're going to absolutely hammer you.
Bloody hell, that could be tricky. Mark, did you say that Sharp...
Sharp had had it last time, the TV branding last time with the 2012 Championships, yeah.
But I think it's certainly. I mean, I believe Phil, you mentioned that to me last week. Reminded me last week that Howard Grinrod, who is the managing director of Hisense in the UK, did sort of allude to it when we met with him at CES. And I think this is, it shows that Hisense are a serious brand who want to be taken seriously, and this kind of sponsorship certainly will raise their profile. It shows that they mean business in Europe.
Yeah, and of course it's not just TVs. Obviously we take an interest because of TVs, but they're also a big mobile handset provider as well.
And white goods, they do a lot.
White goods as well.
Refrigeration products.
Yeah, so it seems like they've got a lot of bases covered, and makes sense to get the brand name out there. And what bigger stage to do it than a major European final? I mean, obviously the only bigger thing they could have done would have been the Olympics, but that's Panasonic's, and I don't see them giving that up anytime soon.
If you look at the other sponsors, obviously sponsoring different product sectors, we've got the likes of Adidas, Carlsberg, Coca-Cola, Hyundai, McDonald's, Orange. They're really, with the big global brands.
Top tier brands, yeah.
Yeah. First Chinese company to be sponsors of a UEFA competition.
There you go. Lots of us. So
Thank you, Stato.
It's all right.
Nice to see you did some research for that story, Mark.
I'm just reading it.
Yeah. Okay. Next up on the list is Netflix. They're going to stop you accessing their content via DNS and services like Unblock Us and so on. Good luck to them, is all I will say, because I think this is, reading between the lines, this is lip service being paid to content providers who they've signed licensing agreements with, because if Netflix was to close the back door, I think they would more or less lose a shed load of subscriptions straight away if people couldn't access other regions.
I think that's particularly true.
Don't doubt for a second it would lose a chunk of users, and very committed and otherwise quite enthusiastic users of the service. I was trying to cross-reference the number of UK users of this Unblockers thing versus the actual number of UK Netflix subscriptions, just by way of a percentage example of the actual number of people. And the long and the short of it is there's no really sort of obvious answer. It's not that large a number of group of people using VPNs, it would appear, but as I say, it is a very vocal and enthusiastic group of them.
That's a different story in Australia, though, Ed.
I can imagine.
Yeah, the majority of people using Netflix use foreign services. Apparently.
Well, I mean, we've established in certain Netflix Spain is just soft porn, and Netflix Portugal is supposed to be dreadful as well. So obviously it will go up and down depending on country to country to country. But I don't want to underplay the significance of this. I don't know country to country to country what the percentage of people using the service are. If it's very large in Australia, that's fair enough. I don't know what it is in the UK. I would say that a large number of people have never gone anywhere near anything like that.
There's some people that can't set it up on their tellies as well, can't they?
No, there are other people are just so inept that they can't go anywhere near them. So yeah, they're a different bunch of cretins.
Do you think they're just playing lip service here, just saying it so that?
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
They don't really care, do they?
No,
it's all part of this worldwide rollout, isn't it? That they're negotiating deals with content partners now that are supposed to be global. So I think they're insisting on everything, everything appearing in all territories as they negotiate these new deals. So they're saying in 12 months' time, it's not going to really matter whether that's going to be true or not. I don't know.
Well, I suppose they produce more of their own content too. I mean, most of the stuff I've watched on Netflix recently has been Netflix productions.
Yeah, same.
So to be honest, it doesn't make any difference whether I'm watching it from the US or from the UK. So maybe it will gradually become. It used to be a big deal maybe a couple of years ago, But I think gradually it's becoming less and less of an issue.
Total lip service. You just need, that's all it is.
Yeah, as you know, I spoke to a friend who runs a DNS service, and he basically just said within minutes they'll be able to get a private IP, hide themselves away from Netflix and stream as they were, before any of the blocks are put in place, and they'll just choose, Netflix will just choose some of the big services like Hola. They'll block them for a while and they'll find a way around it, and that'll be that. So yeah, it is total lip service as we've.
But I mean, just reading the thread attached to the news story, it seems like everybody that's using the services could still use the services.
They've not done it yet. That's why they're not blocked it.
Have they not?
No.
Yeah, I did check on Friday actually, but mine was fine. So apart from that,
they've not done it. It was in the coming weeks, isn't it? So it wasn't an immediate thing.
Oh.
Which is surprising they're taking so long to do it, because they've obviously known about it.
They're giving everyone plenty of warning to circumvent it before they get around to it.
Yeah. I used to use a VPN to get around things, but I don't bother now, because I think there's plenty on there to keep me busy, because I tend to watch that much anyway. But I would imagine anybody that uses a lot of the content. I mean, what can you get at the moment US wise that's not available over here? Is there anything specific?
Lawrence of Arabia in 4K. That's the only thing I can think of. I know there'll be other stuff.
Ooh, that's piqued my interest.
That's actually quite interesting.
Yeah, that's the one I've earmarked when I've got 3 hours 50 minutes spare.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be an interesting year for Netflix, because I mean, obviously they made that an announcement at CES that they were going to go global. I think it's 190 countries in total, which is a lot of territories compared to what they cover at the moment. But there are other things as well, like Dolby Vision being made available from their streaming service, Dolby Atmos soundtracks on stuff as well. So, there's a lot of interesting things happening with Netflix in terms of upping the game and upping the quality, and it'll be interesting to see how that is rolled out over the year, and being able to access those services and what the quality is actually like. Because I've got to say, looking at their 4K content, and I do admit I have a really good internet connection, Steve, the quality is really, really good. I would say Blu-ray standard for 4K, if not a bit sharper than Blu-ray.
Yeah. I've been watching Marco Polo. I was going to wait.
It looks fantastic.
That's amazing. It looks so good. It looks better than any Blu-ray I've ever seen, honestly.
Yeah.
It looks incredible.
Shut up, the pair of you. I've got one thing I think will be interesting, and you'll have to check this because I won't be able to. But I wonder how HDR will be implemented on. I mean, it's already available on Amazon, and it will be available, as you said, Phil, through Dolby Vision on Netflix. But will it have the same kind of metadata and mapping technology that's being applied in UHD Blu-ray?
Not at the moment, because I couldn't get it to work on Amazon for some strange reason. With HDR projectors, I couldn't get to play HDR.
And I also saw, I was reading some threads on the forum, and someone was saying that it's not like they offer alternatives, it's just the one thing. So, you should be able to select SDR or HDR version, shouldn't you, in order to, if your TV or projector
As far as I'm aware, Netflix already do that, because if you plug it into a non-4K item, it doesn't show you the 4K options. So it only shows you the 4K options if you plug it into a device that obviously talks to Netflix and tells them that it's a 4K device. So I would imagine it's going to be the same with HDR. The device will say, yes, I can take Dolby.
So that'll be down to
Atmos.
the app that the manufacturer puts into their TV, basically, won't it?
Yeah, into the TVs. Yeah, standalone media players are not necessarily understand how that's going to work either. I mean, it has to be HDMI 2.0A anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which we don't have at the moment on the devices that play Netflix and Amazon. So that's an issue as well. That's what I found with the JVC, which we're going to come on and talk about. In fact, we'll move on to that now. That was one of the issues that I found with the X7000 projector. Because the Fire TV wasn't HDMI 2.0A, it wasn't sending any metadata to the JVC, so it wasn't switching it to HDR when I was watching stuff like Mozart in the Jungle. So it didn't pick up that it was HDR. And then even with the Sony VW520, when I fed it the same signal and then switched the HDR on, it looked all wrong. So obviously it wasn't getting HDR. So there's going to be some issues with that. The other thing before we move on to JVC actually is Dolby Vision. They haven't said if it's going to be HDR10 baseline and then as it is on UHD Blu-ray. They haven't said whether that's going to be the case or whether it'll just be Dolby Vision. And if it's just Dolby Vision, then that cuts down your HDR experience on Netflix.
Yeah, I can't. Surely they're going to do HDR10 as a base.
You would have thought so, Mark.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're just going to be LG TVs in this country. You can watch it.
Yeah, which that's just cutting your market right down. You'd think it would make sense for for there to be an HDR10. Anyway, let's move on to the JVC X7000. Finally finished it. Review will be up by the time this podcast goes up, hopefully. The reason it hasn't been up beforehand, I wrote it on the plane for a start.
It was because you haven't been around.
On the way to CES, and then just thought, well, it's pointless putting it out while CES is going on because it would just get ignored. It would disappear down the page, and I think it's a important enough product that gets its 5 minutes of glory on the homepage, and people can find it and read it. It's a really interesting machine. It's come down in price, so the X700 was about $7,000, is that right? 6 something or other.
Yeah.
So this has come down $2,000 basically. It's 5.5, I think.
Yeah.
So $2,000 off the price. It's a brighter bulb. Noticeably brighter because I've got an X700 here. Fair enough, the X700's got 100 hours on it, but I put 40 hours onto the X7000 before I even started doing any review work at all on it, and measurements and so on, and it's still noticeably brighter. In fact, I had to open the iris all the way on the X700 and then dial it all the way down on the 7000 to get them in the same ballpark of brightness. So that gives you an idea of just how much brighter it is. So does it raise the black level floor? It does if you've got the iris wide open, but as I'm using it in a Batcave environment, and it is a Batcave environment, I had it turned all the way down, the iris, manual iris. It has a dynamic iris. You can use it if you want to use it. I did notice it now and again on certain fade to blacks and certain other scenes, and certainly on the credits and stuff like that. I think Auto 1 was the more noticeable than Auto 2, but if you want to use them, I'm not going to say don't use them, but personally I prefer the manual iris because then I'm getting no fluctuations in black level or gamma. It's not messing about with the gamma when it's set manually. In terms of gamma, reasonable performance right across the board. It was relatively flat at 2.4. Not got any major complaints. Black levels are, as you would expect with JVC, nice inky deep blacks, plenty of shadow detail there when set up correctly and used in a Batcave. Light corners. This is when, normally you would notice it when it was HDMI handshaking. So it would go at a black screen. It'd cut the signal and then handshake before and during the handshake you could notice that there were light corners. If you think about the 16:9 ratio, each of the corners it was a little bit lighter than it was in the middle. Didn't notice that at all when there was content on screen. Even really dark scenes that were close to black, like Oblivion with Morgan Freeman, you couldn't see the light corners during scenes like that, so nothing to worry about. You only see it during HDMI handshake. It may vary from unit to unit, but I doubt it. And it's been around on the JVCs for years. I mean, the X700, it's got light corners during HDMI handshake. Almost positive that your X3 will be the same, Steve.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, there's light edges, but you wouldn't notice it at all when you're actually watching content.
No. It's the only thing that I did notice, and it's really noticeable in the X700 sample that I have, and I did notice on the X7000, funnily enough, the opposite side, is that out of the image area that is projected, there's a little bit of light seepage that hits the screen outside of, on a scope screen with a 69, it hits the screen outside the main image area and was noticeable again during handshake, but once there was material on the screen, didn't see it at all. Only mention it for completeness because it's on the X700 and I noticed it on the X7000.
I think that's pretty much sure that's on every single JVC I've ever...
Probably. That's probably the case. It's just that I've really noticed it on the because it stands out on the 700. It was there on the 7000 a lot more subtle.
That's when you're projecting a 1.85 to 1 ratio image onto a scope ratio screen, yeah?
Yeah. And again, once you got 185 material actually playing, it's not there. You can't notice it. Even really dark scenes, again, it's just not there. So I couldn't find any issues. And when we're talking about resolution, I think I covered it when we covered the VW520ES projector. At normal viewing distances in my room from the same spot with either projector, it was a really hard task to make out the extra resolution. It was other attributes of the image that highlighted the differences, such as the darker blacks and better gamma on the JVC compared to the Sony. And the Sony had a nicer colour when calibrated, but it was really subtle.
How was the native colour space on the JVC?
Native is alright if you leave it alone. Obviously, if you use the CMS, then it undersaturates at 75, 50, 25. That's always been an issue. It's something I've highlighted in the review. It's something I will be feeding back to JVC. They need to get fixed because the Sony does it. It holds the points when you calibrate the CMS at 75, 15, 25, it doesn't undersaturate. The JVCs have always done that, and it just needs some work, basically. I would imagine that they need to have a look at the lookup tables and look at another way of implementing the CMS system. The only other thing that was annoying was when you fed it a 4K signal. So again, from the Fire TV with Netflix 4K, as soon as you selected a 4K episode of, say, House of Cards, the screen went blank. It would say initializing for 4K playback on the Fire TV. Screen would go blank with the obviously the handshake. It would then come back. It would say it was doing 3840 by 2160, and then it would look like it had CMD turned full on, frame interpolation full on. Yet if you went into the menus and looked at CMD, it would say it was off. But what you had to do was then select CMD, select it, put it to full select, then set it to off, hit select again, and then it would actually switch it off.
Yeah.
So you would get 24 frames a second or whatever the material is that you're watching. It did it mainly with the Fire TV box when feeding a 4K signal.
It also did it with 3D on the X5000.
Which I was just coming on to. It did it with 3D as well. So it's a little bit of a bug there. That should be fixable via firmware, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So obviously we'll be feeding back on that one. And overall, if it was my own money and I had to make the choice between the VW520 and the 7000, they're both absolutely brilliant machines, I'd go with the JVC just because A, £2,000 cheaper, B, it's fully future-proof in terms of what's coming out. The only issue would be HDR, and I think HDR is not as major an issue, I think, at this moment in time when it comes to projectors over flat panel devices. The flat panel devices, they can do, well, they've got the dynamic range there. They're far brighter than projectors anyway, and it's, that's where the battle's going to be for HDR, and then it'll eventually move to projectors. But I think projector-wise, you really need a laser light source, I would imagine. You need brighter than 1700 lumens, which is what the JVC supposedly out of the box. I would think calibrated, it was around about 1000 lumens when it was calibrated.
Yeah.
So you need the brightness there. So I don't think HDR is a big thing with the projectors, to be honest. It'd be nice if it was there, but I don't think you're going to notice that big a leap. And certainly in the demonstrations that we've seen, Steve, with projectors and HDR, it's not as in your face as it is with flat panel displays.
It's nothing like the same as it is with TVs, is it? I mean, just when your TVs are hitting 1,000 nits of on the specular highlights, then
not even that. I mean, 500 or 600 nits compared to what you're going to get out of a projector. Yeah. You're not going to get anywhere close to that with a projector. And what we've seen has been more subtle in terms of dynamic range and more in the black areas, which it might suit the JVCs. It might help the Sony projectors get even better with their black levels. And I've got to say the gap between them isn't as big as it used to be in terms of black levels because they've gone for the extra brightness and the higher black floor on the JVC. So if you're using that with a dynamic iris against the Sony, there's probably not that big a difference. The JVC will still look nicer, but it's closing. That gap is closing, definitely. And having the two side by side in the same back cave room, that was noticeable.
Was the JVC wider against DCI than the Sony?
Now you see, what I didn't do was track them. I measured them, but I didn't track them 75, 50, 25. I only measured the colour space. And the colour space, there's not a hell of a lot in it. It appears that they're going to land at the correct coordinates. I think the JVC was 90%, 89, 90%, and the Sony was 85, if I remember correctly. This is off the top of my head because it's been a while since I looked at both reviews. And we've had CS and other things sort of pushing that information out of my brain. But I think it's around that. So there's not a great deal of difference in terms of measured gamut. But of course, measured gamut means nothing until you've got content to map that to and to check that it's accurate. We could measure each point, but again, we've no mastered material, with no reference material to actually check that against, which makes things a little bit difficult going forward, and that's going to be the case this year, I think, with our TV reviews and projector reviews. I think we're going to be on not necessarily a learning curve, but looking at how we test and maybe refining our testing regime when it comes to these things, because there's so many new variables coming in with HDR, with wider colour gamut, with the extra brightness. It's going to be an interesting year when it comes to actually testing, and where are we with calibration, and where are we with other things when it comes to HDR and so on. Well, at the moment, I'm being perfectly honest here, we're not really sure, are we?
No, it's a brave and slightly scary new world. Just one last question, Phil. I haven't tested the X7000, but I was impressed with the 5000. Do you think that if you if you were tight on budget, you could go with a 5,000 and still get the majority of the benefits you get from a 7,000?
I don't know, Steve, I haven't seen the 5,000. If you want to be pedantic about it. I think it's a bargain at the price point, the 5,000. If you have to get a projector at the moment, my advice would be go with the 5,000, see where things are in 18 months to 24 months, and then look at further up and see where we are. I think this year, unless you have to replace, we're not going to make ourselves very popular with manufacturers with this statement. But if you don't need to update your projector, I'd probably hang on and wait and see where things go.
Better idea of where TVs are now this year, but I think projectors are definitely still up in the air a bit in terms of 4K support. Light sources, maybe more laser later in the year. HDR definitely is a big question mark at the moment, isn't it, in terms of projectors?
Yep.
Definitely good advice there, Phil.
Yep, I'm not going to be popular, but then we're not around here to be popular. We're here to support our members, and don't buy a projector this year if you're looking to future-proof and to go with a new Blu-ray, 4K Blu-ray, and so on. Hang on. See where things are at the end of the year would be my advice, because we've got CEDIA coming up at the end of the year. That's normally where you get the new models and new announcements and so on. So I would wait till then at least, and then see where the market's going. That's not to say that the VW520 and the JVC X7000 and the X5000 are not good projectors. They are absolutely stonking machines. I can't believe the quality that we get these days at home. It really is stunning when you think back to the days of. And I was thinking about it this week because I've just used the truss that's still attached to the cinema room ceiling that used to hold up.
That's going to be there till the house falls down. Isn't it?
It used to hold up a 90 kilogram Barco 808 graphics CRT projector. When you think back to the days of what we thought was great out of CRTs, and then what we can actually get with digital projection nowadays, the dynamic range that's there, the black levels that's there, the colour. The sharpness of the lens, which was always an issue with CRTs, they always look soft, even when fed HD material. Yes, they had a nicer fade to black, but that was about it, to be honest. That's about the only thing that the CRTs had over that.
And they were the size of a compact car.
Oh, the size of a compact car. You had to go in and realign them almost every time you
have a little Allen key for that, Phil?
I did it. It was all built into the into the remote control. But you had to do that every couple of days. You needed a good 30 minutes to an hour to warm up before you could use it, and so on. So thinking about it, so that truss now holds two JBL Control Ones, which I spent this morning and all of yesterday up a ladder, rejigging the wall mounts that come with them to fit into the truss. And believe me, these things are not going anywhere. I was hanging from them just to make sure they're not going anywhere. So they're now installed for Atmos and DTSX reviews. So at least the truss came in handy now. It's been sitting there doing nothing since the CRT came down. But where we are home cinema wise, and what we saw 2 weeks ago at CES, it was 2 weeks ago, Steve, at CES, with where flat panels are going and where that technology is going. We are so lucky. We really are. I mean, the quality is just outstanding. It really is.
I think, yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, we're fast approaching the point now where the quality we're going to have at home is beginning to outstrip what's available at the cinema in some respects, and that's quite significant, isn't it?
I think some of that's been true for a long time, Steve. It's just that the cinema's always been trying to keep up, and I think it's finally got laser projection. I think that's going to move it on significantly for the cinema exhibition of film. But in terms of black levels, it's always been really quite bad,
true, yeah.
To be honest. You always have better blacks at home, and obviously you've got a wider colour space, but we're going to have that at home soon as well. So
yeah.
It's taking the advantages away. Even immersive sound. I mean, Dolby Atmos was invented to get people back in the cinema. It's only because it then had competitions from Auro and then obviously DTS bumping the gums, because we still haven't seen anything concrete from DTS. But it's taken two other companies to sort of push Dolby to take it into the home as well. So that was supposed to be a theatrical system that made people go to the cinema. I think the only people that can still say you get a better experience at the cinema and it maybe holds true in certain theatres is IMAX, because they demand that the projectors have to be a certain brightness, and the cinemas can't turn them down. It has to be the same experience each time. I mean, I was talking to a very good friend of mine, well, my best mate actually, who I see about twice a year now because we live so far apart, but he's a general manager for one of the big cinema chains, and he was saying that IMAX they say that it has to be a certain volume, and when you got a full cinema, then that's fine, because obviously, as you know, sound absorbs, and higher volume, it's not that big a thing if you got a full room. If there's only two of you sat in the cinema, which does happen from time to time, it is ear-achingly loud, but they can't turn it down because it has to be at that sound level, because IMAX say it has to be at that sound level. So yeah, in terms of quality, it's great, isn't it, Ed?
Sorry, I was
cut them out.
Yes, it is. It's quite something. I don't know. It's still. Don't get me wrong. The actual quality of the hardware in these places has improved considerably. It still comes down, as you might expect, to the quality of the actual mastering work that goes into the film. I mean, we had a discussion. We thought Star Wars was pretty sorted. On occasions, seen things like the Fast and Furious films. Actually, in the cinema, they can just be messy and loud. They actually work sonically better in the home. But things have come on a long way from where they were.
I've never seen one of those movies, Ed, so I couldn't possibly comment.
Oh, you're missing out.
That's I can't be responsible for what you do and don't get up to, Phil. I've been listening to record players for most of the weekend because I am at the cutting edge of technology.
Ed, I would have put my mortgage on that being the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's in so many ways. I'm kind of big into technology and stuff. I mean, I've just got a new pair of glasses, and the frames are the same as what Pagani uses. It's carbo titanium, which may or may not make them fractionally harder for my son to snap in half.
What, you can get them in Specsavers, do you?
I got them at Costco, actually.
Really?
Yeah. And they're great. But and so many other things. I love gadgets and things like that. But this weekend, it's just been about vinyl and Galaxy Quest. I got that in as well. But no, it's I don't know. Still way behind the times, mate.
So that's a JVC projector. So anyway, putting speakers on the ceiling. I know a lot of people won't get away with that. I have put it off as long as I possibly could, to be honest, just because I knew it was going to be a nightmare job. But also, it's a good job that room's a bat cave, because the wiring, I couldn't quite get high enough up on my ladders to put clips in, so I've had to use gaffer tape.
This is sounding like a quality install.
This is just temporary until I can get longer ladders and somebody who's happy up heights, because I'm not happy up heights. The fact that I've gone up ladders and put these speakers up is a miracle, basically. I mean, ask anybody that knows me, I do not like heights. So I've had to
He does not like heights.
I've had to use a little bit of gaffer tape just to hold where it is. Where I can reach it on the wall, it's perfectly straight and it's perfectly clipped into the wall, and I'll get covering for it and you'll never notice it. It's just where I couldn't reach. I've just had to get a bit of gaffer tape in the hand and then stretch as far as I could and then just slap it onto the ceiling. So
you must have quite high ceilings.
Yes,
I'm not going to make a cheap shot at you being short, but nonetheless, I mean, I can. Well, no, I can. I mean, my house is pokey. I mean, I can touch the ceiling.
No, I've got 8.5 feet.
Oh, blimey!
Yeah, it's an old place, so high ceilings, and it's even got picture rail where the picture rails used to be. So it's an old house and it's high ceilings. So yeah, that's the issue. I'm on the top run of the ladder and I'm stretching, which is not a good thing. And I'm short, but not as short as Steve. So anyway, moving on. Immersive audio. So I'll be able to partake in Atmos and DTSX.
Yay!
Because the JBL control ones, they're only 49 quid at the minute. That absolute bargain.
They are spectacular value, those little speakers. They really are.
Yeah. So yeah, I bought a pair of those and some speaker cable. I think it came to about 80 quid for an update, which is not as much as I thought I was going to have to pay out. So yeah, excellent. Might even add some at the front for presence speakers. Yeah.
And what will you be reviewing with this new set?
Well, so hopefully we're going to have some AVRs and processors and amplifiers and stuff coming through with Atmos and DTSX, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy some films. I draw the line at the Transformers and the like, but I hear John Wick's got a good soundtrack on it.
Yeah,
so
John Wick's definitely worth getting, as is Mad Max Fury Road. So.
I'll get that as well. I might even get them on 4K Blu-ray. I've ordered The Martian already on 4K Blu-ray. So,
yeah.
So
have you?
Yeah.
What, from the UK?
No, Amazon.com.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, but I thought I may as well, and then I've got something sitting there that when
But you
I
can watch
finally
the Blu-ray anyway, can't you? Until such time. As
now you see this is another reason I bought it, because I don't know if the Blu-ray is going to be region coded, because I know that the 4K Blu-ray will not be region coded.
Indeed.
But the Blu-ray might still be.
It's Fox, isn't it? So it might be.
Yeah, which is another reason I bought it, just to see if that is the case. That answers a question. Anyway, moving on to immersive audio. What are the latest developments, Steve? Because you've been talking to the people in the know.
We have. Well, we met with Dolby, although in fairness, Dolby were very much pushing other things than Atmos to mean they were pushing their new AC4 codec, and also obviously pushing Dolby Vision. They were also demonstrating Dolby Atmos, but I guess because Dolby Atmos has been available to the consumer in their home for well over a year now, that was less of a priority than the other things that they were showing at CES. And also they've got a relatively good catalogue of discs now. There's I think about 40. So that's a fairly decent catalogue, and some of them are good films too. Some things like Mad Max, Fury Road, that sort of stuff. So they were, I think, very sort of confident as far as Atmos is concerned. They did demoed it twice for us. Once with the YSP 600 Yamaha Atmos enabled, and DTSX at some point enabled soundbar. Got to say, not that well set up, because I have heard that demo, and I believe you have as well, Ed, at IFA, and I thought it was bloody impressive. I thought it was rubbish at CES.
It was far more impressive in the room that Warren that we're speaking to was in, because they were demoing it in two rooms. In the room that we had it in, there was no back wall to it, and it was all false walls anyway.
Yeah. It was not the best environment to try and use that soundbar. We also had a demonstration where they actually had. Were they upward firing speakers? They were upward firing speakers, weren't they?
Yeah.
Again, it wasn't an ideal environment. Full ceilings, that kind of stuff. It really wasn't. They were not the best environment for them to demonstrate either the soundbar or an upward firing Atmos configuration. To be honest, I know it sounds better than that because I've heard it plenty of times at home. I know it does. We will be getting the YSP 5600 in quite soon for review, and we'll test that in an environment which will be more appropriate for its technology.
Who's doing that?
Me.
Oh, okay, fine.
Why?
I was just wondering.
Yeah, I should be doing it. Well, obviously, I can compare it to actual Atmos with overhead speakers, so we'll see how well. But certainly, the demo that they did in but
you're not the only one with overhead speakers.
No,
now,
well, you can do it if you want to.
Captain Gaffer wants to make use of.
Anyway, so that's that. Atmos. I think Atmos is very well. People are familiar with it. It's well established. It's got an excellent. I think it's got something like. They did send some statistics out during CES. It's something like 60 different products with Atmos in it now, and over 100 discs worldwide, of which 40 I'm familiar with, but also stuff in places like China, that kind of thing. So a decent catalogue of discs, plenty of processors and amplifiers, etc., that can now decode it. So I think Atmos is well established. DTSX, unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to meet with them because we had an overlapping meeting that we had to rearrange, so we didn't get to meet them. But let's be honest, they have been a bit AWOL so far. Since announcing their big announcement in April, it still hasn't actually been delivered to the consumer. I have had a chance to experience it with a beta test. The final version of the Denon upgrade is coming out. The firmware update releases on 28th of January. So that will actually be available to X7200 owners in 10 days. Well, actually 8 days after this podcast goes up. So very soon that will actually be available to the public to try. And basically the configuration is the same as Atmos. So it's very similar. And then the other thing, obviously, is Auro 3D. And we did get a chance to meet with Wilfred again. Since we'd seen him the year before, there's been, they've actually had a Blu-ray release, which Mark, when I was interviewing him, I said pixels instead of pixels.
It's catching.
Oh, so that was a comment about Rouge, was it?
Yeah, pixels. Oh, God, why did I say that?
It does sound better. It's more exotic.
Yeah, but the thing is, Mark, it's in that interview, so we'll be able to, keep bringing that up again. Yeah, it's in the video.
Yes, so Pixels has been released in the UK with an Auro 3D soundtrack. It's also available in the US, interestingly, with an Atmos soundtrack. And I plan to do a comparison of the two and see if there's any noticeable difference or which one I might prefer.
That will happen because I was there when you bought the discs.
Yes, you were. And I also got hold of the German copy of Red Tails, which has an Auro soundtrack as well. No, unfortunate film.
So some quality filmmaking for you to sit through there.
I tell you what, I suffer for this job. I really do.
Whatever.
So anyway, Wilfred did sort of intimate that there might be other Blu-ray announcements coming, but he wanted to leave that to the studios to do rather than him. Fair enough. But we did get a chance to talk about, obviously with Atmos and effectively DTSX sharing a similar configuration in terms of you can do a 7.1.4 or whatever for Atmos, and you can do something exactly the same, or you can do something similar for DTSX. I said, what about your system? Because clearly they use Auro has height speakers above the front front speakers and the side surrounds. There are other alternatives too, but that's the main one, like a 9.1 system basically with 4 height speakers front and rear. And Wilfred's view, and I guess he would say this, but it makes sense to me as well, is he would prefer it if people used his configuration, because that obviously works perfectly for Auro, but also he thinks it does translate quite well to listening to Atmos.
Well, we've been saying this for a long time on this podcast, and I've brought it up numerous times that his explanation of you don't have an ear on the top of your head is a good one to go with, because in real life you don't have reflections that come from above you, and in the vast majority of cases, even in concerts and stuff like that where you're in an arena, you're getting more from the sides and up to about 30 degrees than you are above you. So it makes absolute sense that for it to sound natural, the speakers should be at 30 degrees. Now, I'll be buggered if I'm now going to go and take the speakers down and put them at 30 degrees on the side after spending all weekend putting them up. But
there's only so much gaffer tape a man can have.
Exactly. But the other thing is that there's more Atmos available than there is Auro, and if it ever got to the stage where there was 2 systems, then I think if you're using small speakers like that anyway, you could probably set up for both and just unplug and plug in when you're.
Well, the way I've got my speaker set up can apply to both layouts, both configurations. What I did was I set up an 11-channel processing setup configuration on the X7200, and did all the the calibration, etc., and auto EQ and everything. And then what I noticed was if you played an Atmos demo disc with this with the test tones, it was fine. But when you played the Auro one, the front 2 heights were fine, but the rear 2 heights were silent. And why is that? And apparently that was part of Denon were asked to implement that by Auro and by Atmos from their own perspectives, because Auro's view was you shouldn't be using overhead speakers for your rear your rear heights. However, when the DTS upgrade comes out on the 28th, there will also be a new update for Auro, because Wilfred's decided that it probably makes more sense to be a bit more flexible, and so you can now do that. So you'll be able to run. Basically, what it means is if you're careful about where you position the speakers, you can run all 3 audio formats from one configuration, which, let's be honest, makes perfect sense, because you don't want to be sticking even more speakers up on your ceiling or on your walls if you can avoid it.
Only taken us an embarrassingly long time to get there.
It has a little bit, but I've got to say I'm looking forward to it. I haven't, obviously, I don't have any Atmos receiver or processor in at the moment. I should have this week, because we're getting the CXA 5100 from Yamaha.
Along with the processor in, aren't you?
Sorry?
You're getting a beast of a processor.
Yeah, and along with the MXA 5000 amp, which is an 11-channel amp.
That's going to weigh a bit, Phil.
Yep, it is just a bit. Struggle getting them up the stairs, I think, but really looking forward to that. The last sort of pre-pro thing I had in was what
was it? Oh, was it the NAD?
The NAD system, which was a stonking system, but it didn't have Atmos or DTSX and so on. So I'm looking forward to getting that in, and should be getting some of the M&K S300s in as well, around about the same time. So some high-end sound in the home cinema here, hopefully, over the next couple of weeks, and really looking forward to that.
I've just seen that the eyeball ceiling mount for the Ellipson Planet M is back in production, which would technically allow me to have...
Are you feeling left out now, Ed?
Well, I'm just looking at it. It's just the only thing that I could do that's notionally quite interesting is I could have exactly the same speaker in every single position other than subwoofer, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which could be quite amusing. And also, it just looks a bit tidier than sticking a pair of JBLs to your ceiling with tape.
No, the JBLs weren't stuck to the ceiling with tape, Ed. They're
connected really dangerous.
They are connected to a truss which held a 90-kilogram CRT projector. They ain't moving. They ain't going anywhere. The speaker cable...
I had a different story.
I had to attach that with tape for the time being until I get a larger ladder so I can get up there and properly, attach them.
Make it pretty.
But hey, I always have gaffer tape around because it's dead useful stuff. It really is.
No, I quite agree.
My house is built on that. Gaffer tape is super glue. That's the blue tack.
And blue tack. That's blue tack's my weapon of choice. It's so flexible.
Oh, it's all getting a bit sticky here now, isn't it? Right. I think we need to move things on because time is moving on. We have the Philips TV in at the moment. Steve, you're going to keep this brief because the TV hasn't been reviewed yet. The review will go up soon, but just give us your first quick thoughts on this and why we've got this in now, because January and February are usually barren months when it comes to new TVs.
Yeah, no, I mean, unfortunately for Philips, their implementation of, didn't just affect them, it affected Sony to a degree as well. Their implementation of Android TV has significantly delayed their TV lineup. So this is the 8601, which we saw at IFA and was supposed to have come out before Christmas, and it only just hit. I think it arrived in the stores maybe just after Christmas and into January. So it's coming pretty late, and that's going to really work against it, unfortunately, because clearly it's coming late after a CES when there's been some significant announcements and changes in terms of TV tech, and I think it's going to struggle a little bit. It's a real shame. It's a real shame. If they got it out quicker last year, I think it would have been a stonking telly at the time. It's a beautifully designed TV. It's the one with the little detachable side speakers, Phil. Do you remember?
Yep.
Nice little sound solution. Sounds great. It looks great. The picture's very nice, nice and accurate, but doesn't support HDR. It is 3D, doesn't support HDR. Its color space isn't that wide, and it's going to struggle against things like TVs now being. It's actually incredibly bright, so it's a real shame it doesn't support HDR because it goes up to well over 500 nits. And the color space was about, I think it was 82-83% of DCI. So, it wouldn't have been qualify as a premium UHD experience. And I think that's going to work against it going forward, because obviously the new TVs are going to be coming out in the next couple of months. But depending on how they price it, now it is priced at 1,700 quid for the 55-inch. If it can be priced well, it might still move, but it's going to struggle because it's going to be seen as old-fashioned now.
Well,
slightly out of date.
I think to qualify that though, Steve, it's going to be seen as old-fashioned by a certain sector of the market. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't know HDR and probably would never have HDR and not interested. So as long as it does the basics right, which I'm assuming it does.
Absolutely, yeah. In terms of as a 4K TV, upscaling full HD content, I thought it looked lovely. It was a really nice picture. It's a well-made, solid TV. It's a really nice design. I like the design. It's attractive. It's got some lovely features in it. The detachable speakers are a nice touch as well. It's got a lot of potential. I just think, unfortunately, because of the timing, it might struggle a little bit, particularly amongst the enthusiast market. But you're right, Phil. Amongst the general public, it's probably going to go down very well. Hopefully, we'll still get to see the 9600, which is their flagship TV that's been significantly delayed. Because we did see that at IFA as well, and that did look stonking.
I don't think we will.
Did they mention that at CES?
No.
They didn't mention it in any of the releases.
If I was Philips at this moment in time, I would bury that model number. I would make sure that the 9600 is updated with HDR and all the rest of it, and then is relaunched this year.
Yeah, it's a premium UHD.
As a premium UHD, yeah.
I think that's what they're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to do, because it's been pulled from the listings, hasn't it? So
yeah, because again, if you released it now at this late stage, it would be treated as a last year's TV, even though I think it was a pretty advanced television in its own right. It's better to just release it as a new TV now, because you can't be releasing 2015 models in January. You're going to get you're going to struggle against either big deep discounts on 2015 models from other manufacturers, or you're going to be up against the new lineups. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like vinyl we're talking about here, where you got 8 years
but
to
overall,
get your product out.
The 8601 is a lovely telly. I like it.
Cool stuff. Right, we need to move on because we're well over time, so we're going to move on to movies in a sec. Okay, so moving on to movie reviews very swiftly. What's at the cinema at the moment, Steve?
At the moment is Creed, which is a kind of a Rocky sequel with the son of Apollo Creed, Carl Weathers' character, who's a boxer now, and Rocky Balboa, played by Sylvester Stallone, obviously, is his mentor and trainer. I haven't seen it, but actually I really want to see it, because reading Kamari's review, it sounded really good.
It did, didn't
I like the idea that there's a single take fight scene in it, which sounds very cool and technically brilliant. So
No, that did sound interesting. I had that. I saw the trailer. I can't remember where I saw the trailer now, and I thought, oh, I'll be avoiding that one like the plague. But actually, having read her review and also seen some of the comments on the forums, it's like, well, maybe I'll give that one a go.
And apparently, Sylvester Stallone.
Stallone does seem to get all of his silliness these days out in the Expendables movies, and the other stuff he's doing often can be surprisingly uncrap.
Apparently, he's very good in this. He won a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, his first award ever as an actor, I believe.
No, didn't he get something for the original Rocky?
He got,
that was a writer. As writer, wasn't it?
Oh, right,
yeah,
fine.
He was nominated as a writer. No, it's his first, I believe it's his first acting award. And apparently, he's really good in it. So that's interesting. What I actually went to go and see was The Revenant, which is the new film from Alejandro Inarritu, who made Birdman, which won Oscar for Best Film last year.
Okay, so a lot of hype, a lot of buzz surrounding this movie at the minute. Kaz gave it 10 out of 10. There's a few people on the thread also giving it 10 out of 10. Mm-hmm. I know you're going to give us a straight answer, Steve, because you're heartless, and you will give us a genuine opinion. What did you think?
I thought that as a piece of filmmaking, it is absolutely astonishing.
Okay, good enough for me.
Absolutely astonishing.
Good enough
as a
for
story,
me. Right, I'll go to the cinema and see it.
No, you have to go and see it, Phil. Absolutely astonishing piece of filmmaking. It's a grim story, and DiCaprio's character has a quite really overdeveloped sense of survival, because he goes through absolute hell in a sort of revenge to try and get the guy who's wronged him. I don't want to give too much away about the plot. Well, the plot's fairly basic. It's more like a man against man and against the elements, but the photography in it and the film. I mean, there are scenes where you sit there and think, how did they do that? For example, it's well advertised. There's a bear attack in it. There's absolutely gobsmacking. I mean,
it was advertised as something else initially.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit unfair. But obviously it's a CGI bear. But I mean, and this is a film where realism is. I mean, the film was shot for real in quite difficult circumstances, and in chronological order, which is unusual. And so, if you're going to have CGI in the film, it has to be really good, because if it doesn't look real, it's going to bugger up everything else. And it does look completely real. It's brilliantly done. There's a scene where he's being chased on a horse, and the camera goes with him and the horse over the edge of a cliff, which is just, you think, blimey, how do they do that? There's a whole single take fight scene with people getting stabbed and fingers being cut off and this sort of stuff that's in just one single take that you think that's really impressive. There's long takes. It's gorgeously shot. It's on the Alexi, the Arri Alexa 65. I feel it's 6.5K.
Yeah.
It was shot on that camera, and just all natural light.
I mean, what I've seen so far does look absolutely beautiful.
It is, as a piece of filmmaking, it is quite astonishing. And the performances are fantastic in it, although I think DiCaprio will win the Oscar for basically spending most of the film crawling around on the floor and grunting, which is interesting.
I think it's a bit timey. He got one though, is it not?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think this is his best performance, but he is the best actor of his generation and well overdue for an Academy Award, in my opinion. It's absolutely worth seeing on the biggest screen possible. It is a quite astonishing piece of filmmaking and a compelling story. And if nothing else, it just shows you how horrible life must have been like on the frontier back in the mid 18th century, 19th century.
Okay, moving things on quickly. What's opening up this weekend? Keeping it brief.
This week, we have The Big Short, which is based on a true story about a bunch of journalists who basically shorted the banks in the financial crisis back in 2008, directed by Adam McKay. So it's got an amazing cast. It's got like Brad Pitt, Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell, kind of drama/comedy. I'm definitely going to go and see, if only because I'm interested. That's my past, so I will be interested to see how that's played out and how accurate it is. There's also Our Brand is Crisis, which is a comedy drama starring Sandra Bullock about PR people, and also Ride Along 2, sequel to Ride Along with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart, where they basically are a bunch of cops.
Okay, so Blu-rays coming out this week. We've got Everest, and we also got Sherlock, the Abominable Bride. I watched that on iPlayer in HD. No need to go and buy the Blu-ray. Wasn't that great, was it? No,
a bit disappointing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I felt like what I was watching was a very long like prologue to the next season.
Yeah, which is basically what it was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was very much almost as bad as Bobby Ewing stepping out the shower.
It was. Although, interestingly, going back to Dolby Atmos for a second, the Blu-ray does have a Dolby Atmos soundtrack, as does Everest.
Oh well, then, Steve, I'll go and buy it then.
Everest might be worth getting though, actually, because at the cinema I remember thinking when the big storm hits, it's some serious action going on there, so that should be quite good in Atmos.
That's supposed to be a laugh a minute as well.
I do remember your wife's review of Everest. Was it grim as fuck?
Yes, that was the basic crux of that.
They should put that on the box, shouldn't they?
Grim as F **K.
That's actually a big recommendation for me. I love.
Well, definitely go to the Revenant then.
Yeah, that's well up my street.
The Revenant's right up your street if that's the case, as is Everest in that case.
Also, Blu-ray releases next week. A big movie. Can't be underestimated how powerful this movie is. Bad Boys 2. Finally coming to...
First time on Blu-ray.
To Blu-ray,
yeah.
Yeah, and some other film called Legend.
Yeah, the Reggie Cray pick with Tom Hardy, who's also in The Revenant. Bad Boys 2. I mean, a lot of people diss.
I've got to say, it's one of my guilty pleasures is Bad Boys and Bad Boys 2. Totally. I love them. Absolutely love them to bits. They're so over the top, and how Martin Lawrence ever got his name above Will Smith's in the lineup. I think you said that a few months ago.
Bad Boys 2, yeah. When Bad Boys 2 was made, Will Smith was definitely arguably the biggest star in the world.
Yeah, Martin Lawrence still had his name above him on the credits, which is something else.
But it's a fun movie. It's got a fantastic car chase in it.
Fantastic cars in it. Really, really. I mean, that's just filmmaking. It's got every cliche of his style of filmmaking in there. Every camera move that you could ever think that'd be used is there. Every explosion is in your face. It's just fantastic. It's just...
Interestingly, apparently he reins it in quite a bit on his new film 13 Hours. So interesting to see Michael Bay making something slightly serious for a change.
I don't think it'll work. if it's not got robots and explosions in it anymore, I don't think he's interested.
And on that bombshell.
Is it a bombshell or not?
On that damn squib.
You vote. Right, yes, I think we've kind of outstayed our welcome yet again this week. Thanks very much for listening. As always, you can leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes if you enjoyed the show, and we will read your names out. We'll do that at the end of every month. So you have until next week to get your 5-star ratings in, and we'll mention them next week. So that's it for the podcast. My thanks to Steve Withers.
By Grabthar's hammer, by the sons of Warvan, you shall be avenged.
Mark Hodgkinson.
Give him a hand. He's British.
And Ed Selley.
I was an actor once, damn it.
Don't forget, you can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And like I say, give us the 5-star ratings. We'll mention you next week. I'm Phil Hinton. Thanks very much for listening. And we'll see you again next Wednesday.